Welcome to the enchanting world of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the film that launched a billion-dollar franchise, captivating hearts with its perfect blend of enchantment, adventure, and mystery. Discover how this iconic first chapter set the stage for an epic saga that continues to enchant fans around the world. Let's dive into the magic. In 1997, the launch of a book began a revolution that would start in the United Kingdom and spread across the world. That book was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, written by J.K. Rowling. The popularity of this book was largely due to how J.K. Rowling constructed a magical and fascinating world, filled with memorable characters and thrilling plots, leading to the continuation of the saga with the Chamber of Secrets in 1998, which was, of course, another success. Consequently, several studios took notice of the product and wanted to bring it to the big screen. Rowling met with almost all the studios and decided to sell the rights to Warner Bros. Due to her creative vision for the saga and her commitment to maintaining the integrity of the books and the film adaptations, David Heyman was chosen to be the producer of these movies. Warner Bros. Was confident that he was the right man to lead this saga. Heyman wanted to greatly respect the agreement that had existed with the author, which is why the producer's inclusion of J.K. Rowling in the adaptation process was crucial. He wanted to work closely with her to ensure that the films were faithful to her original vision. But to start working on the movie, it was crucial to find out who would be the leader to drive it forward. It was time to find a director. When they began the search, they spoke with several well-known directors. Some media even saw Spielberg as the confirmed director, but then he regretted it and decided to fully engage in other projects. However, there was one director who was enchanted by the book and wanted to turn it into a movie. This was none other than Chris Columbus, a legend behind the creation of family movie classics such as Home Alone and its sequel. Chris called his agent with the idea of securing an interview with Warner. He insisted a lot, and the studio granted him an interview. Chris arrived at the meeting with a script. He had taken 2 weeks to write a draft of the story and had thought of all the details to be able to make this film. And that project he had presented had shown Warner that the director wanted to make a great movie with the material he had. Chris felt that the film had to be very British, so for the audition process they went through a large number of children in England who wanted to be part of the project. Emma Watson was only 9 years old when she heard the rumor that they were looking for young actors for the Harry Potter movie. She was a huge fan of the books but had never acted professionally. Rupert Grint had not acted either, but he still wanted to participate in the casting. That's why he innovated in the auditions. He sent a video when this was something unusual, and thus managed to stand out among thousands and got his chance to audition. Chris and his team realized that both Emma and Rupert stood out from the rest. The camera loved them, and above all, they were very intelligent and funny for their age. So the team had already found the faces of Ron and Hermione, but they still hadn't found the most important one: Harry. It was July 1999, and they haven't found an actor for the main role, and they were supposed to start filming in September. The studio was already beginning to feel pressure. The producers received constant calls to see if they had found the young actor. And even the press published articles about the problems that the pre-production of the movie had. After seeing thousands of auditions of young actors, Chris watched the movie David Copperfield, in which he had seen a young actor who had a lot of potential to be Harry Potter. This was Daniel Radcliffe. So the producers met with Daniel's parents, but they weren't enthusiastic about this idea. They said that would be too much of a disturbance for the rest of the kid's life. Fortunately, a few days later, David Heyman casually encountered Daniel and his parents at the theater and couldn't take his eyes off the young actor. At that meeting, he confirmed that Daniel had the soul to be Harry Potter. David had a brief chat with Daniel's father, which convinced him to at least let Daniel try out for an audition. And they only needed that audition in front of the cameras for everyone to realize that Daniel was the Harry Potter they had been searching for so long. Daniel Radcliffe secured the role. Everyone was very satisfied with the audition. The main trio was perfect, even better than they had initially imagined. That's why the first thing they did was organize a meeting so that the three could get to know each other. And from there on, not only did an incredible chemistry emerge between them, but also a friendship that was evident in the first screen tests they shot together. But one of the biggest challenges in adapting the book was creating Rowling's magical universe. The first thing they did was call Stuart Craig, who would be in charge of creating this entire world, transferring everything from the books to the real world. That's why the first thing Stuart did was meet with J.K. Rowling and ask her all the questions they had about her world. And at that meeting they had, she explained everything, but she also drew on a piece of paper she had on her desk, a sketch of how Hogwarts was laid out. And they used this as a Bible until the last movie. They referenced several universities and churches in England to create this world, especially the iconic castle. One of the most challenging creations that caused many doubts was the Great Hall. In the books, it is described as a room where 900 students could dine, something impossible to achieve. They tried the dining hall of the University of Oxford, but it was too small and far from looking impressive. That's why they chose to create this setting from scratch, making it a bit smaller than the original concept. And this would fit around 400 students. The decoration they chose was all real, which took weeks of work. Even the candles we see floating are real. J.K. Rowling visited the filming sets and could not believe all that they were creating. When she saw everything that was Diagon Alley, she burst into tears with emotion. Stuart Craig and his designers excelled in recreating everything that emerged from the writer's imagination to depict the torment Harry suffers while living with the Dursleys. They sought a completely boring and routine neighborhood, which is why we see identical houses. All the scenes of Harry living with his uncles were filmed in a real house without any problems despite the small space they had. But this universe always presented a new complexity, in that some scenes required the presence of owls. And Chris was determined to use real animals so that this world would look as realistic as possible. The problem introducing these birds to the movie was that the noises and lights bothered them, and they could not be filmed. That's why they had to recreate practically the entire neighborhood in a studio to only film these scenes, although later this set would end up being reused in all the following movies. For Chris, the biggest challenge were the Quidditch scenes because they involved creating a completely new sport. That's why the director spent hours with J.K. to fully understand the rules and how it worked. But the challenge was not that they could understand it, but that the audience could quickly grasp it. And the visual demands to create it were even more difficult than expected, since they had very little time to film the scenes. The set pieces that required visual effects had to be placed at the end of the schedule. And when that time came, they realized they would have less post-production time to create visual effects that really worked. Although the entire sequence works well, the director was not satisfied with the result, and to this day regrets not having more time to work on it. The filming of this movie required more time than usual, which typically took 2 or 3 months. On this occasion, it would need 11 months, and this was due to the fact that most of the scenes were led by children. And a particular protocol had to be followed. They needed 3 hours for the production to prepare them and explain everything they had to do. 1 hour for lunch and 15-minute breaks after every hour of filming. They could only film 4 hours per day, and that was not much. That's why when the filming started, nerves affected everyone involved. Chris remembers going to the first shoot thinking that if he failed, everyone would hate him. But the nerves also affected the rest of the team, and especially the younger ones, who did not have much experience. And it showed. That start was not the best of all. It was full of problems that changed the ideas they had in mind. For example, they wanted Harry to have green eyes, not blue like the actors. That's why he was going to wear contact lenses to achieve the color mentioned in the books. But during the first tests, they realized that he was allergic, and they had to discard them. Even in that first scene, we could see him with swollen and teary eyes. So after these takes, Daniel never wore contact lenses again. The scenes were very costly due to the inexperience of the young actors. Many actors didn't even understand what the call to action meant. But the key factor in bringing out the professionalism of the young actors was thanks to Chris's work. Chris went line by line and told the children how they should perform them. But for Chris, it was also crucial that the young actors were surrounded by experienced people that supported them. That's why the director chose each of the great actors who would be part of the cast. One of the first chosen was Maggie Smith, the respected British actress. She was perfect for the role of the strict but loving Professor Minerva McGonagall, due to her authoritative presence and her ability to play more complex characters. From the moment J.K. Rowling began describing the character of Snape to Chris, he immediately thought of Alan Rickman. They offered the role to the actor, but initially, he would not accept because he was weary of playing villainous characters. However, in a discussion with J.K. Rowling, she revealed some background details about his character, which made him change his mind. The first scene filmed for the entire movie was Harry saying goodbye to Hagrid, portrayed by Robbie Coltrane. This cast choice was a very important request from J.K., since she felt he was the right actor to give life to that strong and imposing gatekeeper who was also kind and humorous. But there was one character that was very difficult to cast. Dumbledore needed to represent a paternal figure who appeared mischievous and had a certain twinkle in his eyes. This character would interact a lot with Harry and was key to the entire saga. That's why they chose Richard Harris, who coincidentally was the godfather of David Heyman. Initially, Richard was reluctant to take on this role, even delaying his response for months, but the person who convinced him was his granddaughter, who was a fan of the books. But despite being surrounded by great professionals, the young actors always made some mistakes. That's why, to make the most of the few filming hours, all scenes were recorded with a dedicated camera on each of the 3 children. And that is the reason why in the first movie we see so many cuts. This was done so that if one of the young actors got bored, laughed, or looked at the camera, it would not ruin the scene. After nearly a year of filming, it was time to start with a new problem. The director faced the challenge of starting to work on the editing of this movie and at the same time began pre-production of Part 2. So there was no time to lose. In the editing process, one of the keys was the sound and music. If there's one undeniable statement about films, it's that music can completely change the way we perceive them. John Williams, the composer, was tasked with bringing another kind of life to the world of Harry Potter. That's why he received the first cut of the film to start working on it. This cut was 3 hours and a half long and, of course, was later reduced. But the result of John's work was so astounding that it led them to re-edit the film and add scenes that had been cut, such as the arrival at Hogwarts. Initially, the director felt this part was very slow and boring, but with John's music, the sequence ended up being addictive. John Williams' music ended up being key in the saga and remains unforgettable to this day. With the musical part complete, anxiety for the film's premiere increased. Chris was acutely aware of the weight of his decisions. He was already working on a second movie. A whole saga was being conceived, and if his vision failed, everything would go down the drain. On November 4, 2001, the movie's avant premiere was a total revolution. The audience connected instantly with the product, but above all, with the 3 young protagonists who were living a dream. The particularity of this is that the movie premiered on a Friday, and they began filming The Chamber of Secrets on Monday due to the impressive figures. The filming began without those fears of having failed to bring this imaginary world to life. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone had grossed almost $1 billion worldwide, and for the studio it had been an impressive profit, given that the budget was only $125 million. And that's how the legend of the boy who lived began. Hey there! Thanks for watching. If you loved exploring the stories behind iconic movies with us, make sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss an update. We appreciate your support and can't wait to share more fascinating movie tales with you.